Hey guys, thanks for joining me today for this painting tutorial. Today we'll be painting a snow globe in acrylics. If you check the description box below, it'll have a list of the supplies and materials I used for this painting, as well as links to my social media sites. So I'm starting by laying the base in with Prussian Blue and Phthalo Blue and Titanium White. I'm using a round sponge and using horizontal strokes. I'm really just looking for a gradient of color. This will be the first coat that I do. I let that dry and I go ahead and put in my horizon line so that I know exactly where my land and my sky are going to meet. Now I'm doing my second coat. This time I'm using a flat brush. However, I preferred the sponge and I wish I would have used it for the second layer. You can use whatever tool that you would like that kind of gives you a smoother finish. But I'm pretty much applying just the Prussian Blue to the very bottom of the horizon line and working my way up, adding white as I get towards the top, and as well as the Phthalo Blue. Just want to make sure everything's kind of smoothed out. Most of it's going to be covered with the bokeh background, so it's not necessary that it's a perfect blend. You really just want to make sure you have a decent gradient. I'm going to go ahead and put in the base layer for the snow, and I'm just using some X strokes, just kind of creating some different little hills and valleys in the snow just to give it a little bit of visual texture. And this is the same colors. I'm using Prussian Blue, Phthalo Blue, and Titanium White. Less of the Prussian Blue and more of the Phthalo Blue. And once I get that in, I let the background dry completely. And again, I'm going over it for a third time just to make sure I get a nice gradient and I'm happy with it and I get the depth that I want. This time I am using the sponge. You could stick to the sponge for all 3 layers, but you just want to make sure it's completely dry before you go in. After each layer, you want to make sure it's completely dry before you go in and put more paint on it, or it will kind of pull off the previous paint. And again, just using horizontal strokes, making sure that everything has a decent gradient. The blend isn't as necessary. You do want to have some sort of blend, but if it doesn't blend perfectly, I wouldn't even worry about it because we're going to be going over it with the bokeh background. So now I'm putting in my brighter areas, and this on camera it looks white. It's not. It's a warm white. I did add a tiny bit of yellow ochre to that, just so that it kind of warms up. It's a good contrast between the cooler shadowed areas to have a nice warm highlight. Again, using the same strokes as I did before, just making sure that I use the titanium white and the yellow ochre mixture sparingly. I really just want it to be lit up towards the left of the globe. So what I used for the snow globe, and this is a 9x12 canvas panel. What I used for the snow globe was just a 5-gallon paint can. And it seemed like the perfect size for that. So anything round that you can find throughout your house to kind of trace that on. I did use a pastel pencil. You can use chalk if you prefer. It just doesn't give you quite as an accurate line. You just want to make sure you put your globe on, or at least the placement of where you're going to want it, so you know where to put your bokeh dots. And I did use a round sponge tool for this. However, you'll see I ended up using just a soft Scrumbler brush, and I really liked that better. So I would suggest just starting with that and creating circular shapes. So I'm using various sizes. I have the small, medium, and the large, and you do want to make sure that you overlap some of them and varying your colors. It is the same colors that I used for the background. Less of just a tiny bit of the Prussian Blue sometimes. but mainly it was the Phthalo Blue and Titanium White mixture. Not using any pure white at this point. And now I'm going to go over with the Scrumbler brush and just kind of tone down some of the areas and soften some of the edges. Like I said, with the dotting tool, it wasn't as soft of an edge that I was looking for, so I do suggest just using a softer brush to create some round shapes. And I'm glazing over these to tone them down just a little bit with just some thinned out paint, so I just added some water to them. The main thing with these, so that they don't look like polka dots, is to have the different values. So you're going to have some that are darker, some that are lighter, and then you're also going to want to have different sizes. Some small, some medium, some large. That creates more of the depth that you're looking for this kind of a background. And we're really not looking for perfection. The background isn't the main subject, so I would just suggest, you can even, if you wanted to skip out on the bokeh dots, you could do just a splatter. If I were going to do a splatter, I would have done the Phthalo Blue and white mixture thinned down with water and splattered the background to make it look like snow. There's a lot of different options. You could leave it just the gradient background that we had. Whatever you prefer, whatever your level of artistic ability is at this point, I would just do whatever you're comfortable with. So now I'm going to go ahead and put in the base. I'm just sketching in with the pastel pencil the base of the snow globe so that I have an idea of where I want it, where everything's going to land and where everything's going to fall. And the nice thing about the pastel pencils and the chalk is that if you don't get your drawing correct the first time, it's easily you could just wipe it off or erase it. It comes off very easily. Again, I'm trying to create the base of this snow globe, and I want to make sure it has the rounded effect. So when I am drawing it on, I'm making sure that I'm rounding all of the edges so that it does appear as if it's three-dimensional. Once I get that in and the background has had time to dry, I go in again and I brighten up some of the bokeh dots a little bit more. Again, I'm using the Scrumbler brush for this. You could use just a round brush. You just want to make sure that it is a dry brush and you're using just a very small amount of paint. The look that we're going for is pretty much no hard edges, really just a soft look. I'm continuously checking the composition and making sure that I have as many dots as I'm looking for to give the appearance that there's snow falling in the background. So really just stand back from it and check your composition every once in a while. So now I'm adding in some brighter highlights. These are even brighter. This is just pure white at this point. And I'm just adding just a little bit, just to give it a little bit of a sparkle on some of these. use this titanium white sparingly. So I went ahead and sketched in a design. You can do whatever design you prefer, whatever house. Maybe there's one from your childhood that you want to use. Whatever strikes you. I just wanted a basic house. I knew I wanted some trees in there, so I just sketched this out real quick. Right now I'm just establishing my light areas and my shadow areas on the house to try to create some form. For the house colors, I used primarily burnt umber, some Paynes Gray, titanium white, yellow ochre, and a little bit of the Pthalo Blue. I did leave some of the background color showing through in some areas, especially on the shaded areas, just to give it a cooler tone, and kept more of the warm colors towards the highlight areas. I want to make sure I get enough shadow underneath the eave of the house to give it more dimension in those areas, to make sure that it looks like the house is receding in those areas. And then I am adding a little bit of warmth around the windows because later on I'm going to be putting in the warm glow from the windows, and I want to make sure some of that warmth carries through onto the house. At this point, I'm not bogging myself down with any kind of details. I'm really just laying in a base, making sure I've got the right values that I want. And because it's going to be covered in snow at the end, it's really not necessary to get it too detailed. Even at the completed painting, it's not necessary because a lot of those details are just going to be hidden by the snow. So now I'm going in with the Phthalo Blue white and a little bit of Mars black, and that's just to tone it down just a little bit so that the Phthalo Blue isn't quite as bright and vibrant. And I'm just giving it a good coverage, a good base on the roof for the snow that I'm going to be putting on top. I want to make sure I get my structure down for the bottom of the snow in place so that I can make sure I have all of the house covered as far as the highlight and shadow areas, and making sure I bring it all the way down to the snow and just pretty much giving it a nice even coat. I am using just sporadic brush strokes just to give it some texture. Now the bottom of the globe here, you want to make sure is dark because this is what gives it the three-dimensional look, as if it is a globe and there is snow, a pile of snow inside of it. If you left this the same color, you wouldn't be able to tell that it was an actual 3D shape. Again, I'm always establishing my values, so I make sure I give it enough dimension and it reads properly. I know that the left side of the house is where I'm going to put most of my highlights, so I'm keeping those areas warm in colors. So I use more of the yellow ochre, some burnt umber, and on the other side, I'm using more of the Paynes Gray or Phthalo Blue to keep it on the cooler side. Now I know I want these windows to be nice and vibrant, so I'm going in with a layer of just white, no water added to the brush at this point. I want to make sure it gets a nice even coverage. And accuracy around these windows isn't important at this step. We're going to go ahead and outline them anyways in black, and that'll kind of clean up the edges a little bit better. You just want to make sure all of that blue is covered up where you're going to be putting the glow, because we're going to be using some orange and some yellow, and doing so you'll end up with green if you don't cover up that blue. So for the door here, I'm just loosely blocking this in. I'm using burnt umber and Cad Red Deep for this. Now I want to add some texture to the house. I'm doing this, it could be, the eye could maybe see brick or some log. It's really not important. I just want to give it a look that there is some kind of texture there, and it is being lit up and it's not a flat surface, just to give it that textural element. And I'm still keeping even with the highlights. I'm using very little white. It doesn't quite pick up the warmth on the camera, but I am using very little white, and you want to reserve the white for the very end of the painting and use it just sparingly, or you'll lose the effect and the three-dimensional look that you're after. So again, I'm still adding some texture to this side, and it's just a very slight highlight, but it is a cooler highlight on this right side of the house. Now I'm going to go ahead and block in some of the snow for the roof. I'm just using a large round brush. You can use whatever brush you prefer and whatever texture. If you use a flat brush, you're going to have a smoother looking snow. This on camera looks like I'm just going in with titanium white. However, it is the titanium white and a little bit of the yellow ochre just to warm it up a little bit. And I'm laying that same mixture down on the bottom in the brightest areas that I want the foreground to show in front of the house. And I'm amping up the highlights on the foreground and the snow just to reestablish that. You'll notice with acrylic paints, they dry about a shade darker than when applied. So you do want to continuously adjust that as it dries. Now I'm going to create a gradient. So I have that darker mixture that I used with the Phthalo Blue and the titanium white and the Mars black. Now I'm going in with the Phthalo Blue and titanium white mixture and just creating a nice gradient. Again, using the warm white on this. Sometimes using just pure titanium white, it's a little bit too much of a harsh effect, and you end up losing all of that dimension that you're trying to create. So like I said, one of the main things with painting snow is you're rarely going to use just titanium white. It will be a mixture of blues. If you want it to be a cooler looking snow, you could use black and white to create like ivory black and titanium white to create a warmer looking snow for the shadows, but you definitely don't want to use just titanium white. Now I'm going to go ahead and block in the windows. For this, I generally use Liquitex Basics paint. However, I love the vibrancy of Holbein Luminous series paints, and so that's what I'm using for this. Their paint works wonderfully for like fire effects or just anything you want that really rich vibrancy for. Their paints are unmatchable for that. I don't necessarily prefer their regular acrylics, and they are on the expensive side. I think 6 tubes is about $70 or so, so they are fairly pricey. But if you use a lot of fluorescent paints, or you like the vibrancy, and especially for candlelit paintings or anything like that, I love the look of the Holbein Luminance series. So I started out with the orange, the Luminous Orange, I believe, and started adding in some yellow. And then I went ahead and took my Cad Yellow and my Luminous Yellow and titanium white and started mixing that and creating kind of a gradient inside the windows. Now I'm going in and just kind of reshaping the windows a little bit. This doesn't have to be perfect. If you wanted it to be precise, you could use a ruler on each of these angles and create a nice straight line. But like I said, it is a snow globe. It's not going to be perfect. It is not an actual home that somebody's living in. It was just more of the impression that I was going after. But if you are someone who needs to have those straight lines, then I would go ahead and put a ruler down and follow it with your brush to create those nice straight lines. And for this, I'm just using the Mars Black. Now, there is a difference between the ivory black, the Mars black, and the carbon black. The ivory black is going to be a softer black. It's great for, say, portraits, anything that you want a warmer tone with. The Mars black is a cooler tone, and it is a lot deeper in color. And then the carbon black is one of the blackest blacks that you can use. There is darker blacks, but that one is a little bit too stark for what I'm going for. So now I'm just taking a liner brush and just putting in some little window details, or kind of just suggestions of the details there. Again, not trying to be super precise at this point. I know most of this is going to get covered up with snow, and they're not going to be the main focus. And I want to make sure I brighten up that door a little bit. So to that mixture that I used with burnt umber and Cad Red Deep, I just added a little bit of titanium white and just did a few strokes on there to brighten it up just a little bit. And the same thing that I did with the windows, I'm going to go ahead and outline the door now. And then want to make sure that I have enough of the blue that I wanted represented in the shadow areas. So I went back in with my background color and just added a few dabs of that. And you'll notice I didn't even paint the right side of the house, the edge completely, or finish the window, because I know that with my initial sketch, I'm going to have a large tree that covers the majority of that area anyways, but in case any shines through after I get the tree in, I wanted to make sure I had a suggestion of that in the background. Again, just reestablishing this area right in front of the house, the highlight area. I let it dry and decided I wanted a little bit brighter. So just reestablishing all of those areas. Now I'm going to go ahead and paint in these trees. For the trees, I'm using Paynes Gray and Mars Black, just a little bit of the Mars Black. And I'm using a Filbert brush, and I found that the Filbert brush gives the look that I was going after for the branches on the trees. And you want to make sure you just get a nice deep color in there. Just get a good coverage and have the, you know, the triangular shape that a tree would have. And to get it the most natural looking, you want to have sporadic brushes or brush strokes to represent the branches in their natural state. Now I think I'm going in with just a little bit of the Mars Black in the very center area, just to give it a little bit more coverage and a little bit more depth. Now I'm using a mixture of Prussian Blue or Phthalo Blue and Titanium White, and I'm adding in the base for the snow that's going to be on the trees. You want to make sure that when you're putting any highlights on trees or you're putting snow on like these, you want to make sure that you leave a lot of that dark showing through of the base color that we did for the trees. If you lose that, you lose the dimension on the tree and it'll look very flat and it won't look rounded as a tree should. So you definitely want to make sure you gradually work your way up to the highlights and you use it very sparingly. So now I'm using a lighter version of the Phthalo Blue and Titanium White, adding in some more of the highlights on the snow. Being a little bit more selective on where I put these highlights. You don't want to just go over everything that you just did with the snow on the branches because you'll lose the dimension. And going in again with an even brighter version and being very select on where I put that. And you want to make sure you do the shadow underneath the trees. For that, I just used Paynes Gray and just did a glaze with some water, just so that it just kind of tinted that area. For the base of the snow globe, I'm going in with just straight Mars Black, and I'm just creating a nice, rich, deep, dark color for this base. And I'm just filling in everything that I did the initial sketch with. I'm just filling everything in with black. Making sure I maintain that rounded effect where it's a rounded object, so it does want to concave a little bit in the center where it meets the glass of the globe. You want to make sure it concaves a little bit to give it that three-dimensional round illusion. And if you don't have Mars Black, you could definitely use Ivory Black. It's just a little bit of a softer look, like I mentioned. You can also make your own black with burnt umber and ultramarine blue, but it is more of a softer black. It doesn't have quite the value range that Mars Black or Carbon Black has. So now I just want to make sure I darken this area under the globe, under the snow of the globe. just so it reads properly that there is a pile of snow inside of the globe. Now I'm going in with an angle brush and I'm starting to create the shine effects on the globe. This is what gives it that dimension that it is a globe. It's not a circle. It is three-dimensional. And how I'm doing that is the Phthalo Blue, titanium white, and a lot of water. And this creates a transparent layer. And you'll notice as I work on the globe, I gradually build up to more opaque layers. And that's one of the keys with working with anything clear glass. You want to make sure that you gradually build it up so that nothing looks too harsh. So again, going in and brightening up areas even more, you'll see that it dried a little bit darker than I wanted. And that's natural, especially with all the under layers that we have on there of the Phthalo Blue. It's going to seep through a little bit. So just reestablishing those, using more titanium white each time I do it. But honestly, there's not much of just pure titanium white, even at this point. So now I'm going to go ahead and create the snow texture. This can be done a lot of different ways. I chose to just use a nice pointed round brush and create a variety of different shapes and sizes. I didn't want anything that looks like a polka dot. I just wanted a natural looking flake of snow. The other thing when you're going to hand dot these in like this is you want to make sure you're not doing any kind of pattern. It's easy for our brains to get kind of stuck into doing a pattern of sorts, but you really want a chaotic brush stroke with this. Making sure that I go straight over everything that I painted inside the globe, but leaving the bottom half of the globe the original dark color. You can also choose to splatter this. If you do that, however, I would suggest blocking off the rest of your painting. If you do splatter it, it's more than likely gonna go throughout the rest of the painting as well, which is why I chose not to do that route, and I just wanted to be more selective with where I put all of the snow dots and everything, so it didn't cover up one area too much than what I wanted. So now I'm going in and just kind of grounding my globe a little bit, making sure that it looks like it's part of the landscape. Maybe it's sinking into the snow a little bit. Adding in a little hill just to kind of push the snow globe into it more, and reestablishing my highlights and my shadows. That's something when you're painting that you should be constantly doing, is reestablishing those highlights and those shadows. So now that the snow has had time to dry, I'm going to go over and glaze it with just some of the Phthalo Blue and water. And this just tones down some of those white snowflakes. I did use titanium white on the snowflakes just to get the coverage that I wanted. So now I want to make sure I tone down some of those. It's okay to leave some white, some that are pure white, but the majority I wanted to tone those back down. And taking some of that Phthalo Blue and titanium white and a lot of water mixture, and I'm starting to create the glass effects. And for this, I'm just using a nice soft round brush. I want to make sure that anytime I'm putting any highlight on, I'm following the contour of the globe, just to maintain that illusion that it is a 3D object and it is circular in shape. Generally with glass, you're not going to have highlights just on one side of the glass. With clear glass anyways, you're not going to have highlight on just one side. So it is important to make sure you carry that throughout. It's a balance of making sure you're not adding too much of the highlight to take away from all the depth you've created inside of the globe. It's a balance, and it does take some practice. So now I just want to reestablish that nice bright highlight on the outer edge of the globe, using just a small round brush for this. And I'm always using water on these steps, and that just helps the paint flow cleaner and you're not getting a dry brush look. You want a lot of smooth lines when you're dealing with glass. So I decided on the base of the globe, I wanted to go ahead and put a little plaque, and you'll see I end up putting in the date, or the year date anyways. You don't have to do this step. You could do it and put in your last name if you wanted to do that, or Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whatever you wanted. But I'm just going in with black and white and a little bit of Paynes Gray, and just kind of quickly laying it in. I'm really not concerned about the shape of it too much. Making sure that it is reading as if it is a metallic object, or that it is a metal object. So it does have some shine, so it does have those values still in it. And in just a minute, you'll see that I did put the date in. However, I chose to use a Posca pen for that. So I didn't record that part of it because I needed to hold it and write in the 2022 date on there. You can use any kind of acrylic marker. I prefer the Posca pens, but you can use whatever you would like. I just thought that it might be a little bit easier to go ahead and write that in with a Posca pen than trying to brush that in. And I really do hope you enjoyed this video. If you guys do, please like and subscribe. You can hit the bell notification to get notified when I do upload more videos. I plan on doing some more holiday tutorials, and then continuing at the beginning of the new year with some new interesting paintings. And again, you'll find all of these supplies listed below in the description box. You can always comment if you have any questions. I check it frequently. And you can follow my social media pages on Facebook and Instagram, and you'll see what I'm working on a daily basis.